I don't care what you look like or what you think. I don't care what you do or where you're from. All I care about is that gift hidden inside you. And all I want to do is help it come alive. Because where we're going, we're going to need a lot of heroes. For the record, 10,000 Heroes is brought to you by Momentum Lab. The point of Momentum Lab is to turn idealists into impactors by aligning your dreams and aspirations with success in every area of your life today. Momentum Lab is like a playground for your highest self. We take your dreams seriously and help you remove any blocks to realizing them. We do this through courses, virtual events, in-person events, and our signature year-long accelerator. To join our world, engage in dialogue, meet up in person, and just blow your mind, sign up at momentumlab.com. Welcome back to the show, 10,000 Heroes. I'm your host, Ankur Shah Delight, and I recorded this episode, you'll probably tell from the sound, in my studio in the co-working space, which is really much more sound isolated than my studio at home. You hear that? But then I listened to it, and there was a coda I felt like I needed to add in order to make it complete, so I recorded that. And so you'll hear the sonic transition there in the middle of the episode. But this is a very different kind of episode. Normally what we do are interviews with people, or sometimes I do Solocast where I'm exploring a certain topic, or a debrief with a trusted confidant like Nate or Jeff or John Giuliano or Shilpa. But today I've just been reading. I love myths and I love stories, and I feel like we can learn so much from them. So I tried to recount a couple of myths in a really abridged version, of course. I'm not trying to bore you. So listen to them. But I'm very, very, very curious if you find this useful at all, or boring, or engaging, or inspiring, or if it fits with the mission of everything else we're doing here. It's an experiment. I mean, life, this whole scene is an experiment. But within that grander experiment, this is a small experiment. So please let us know how it lands. And today's episode is going to be a solo cast, and I want to tell a couple stories. It's like story time with Ankh. One of these stories comes from Greek mythology. I just recently reread it in a book by Joseph Campbell, and the other is a story from Hindu mythology that I've just heard over the years in India. And both of them I'll probably really, what's the word? It could be bastardized, it could be improvised. Approximate cover might be a good description of it. And in telling these stories, I guess I want to provide a little bit of background, which is my relationship to stories with the divine. Because as someone who never had the good fortune or the luxury of having a literal relationship or belief in the divine, the stories are really important to me. And that I know there's so much power and so much wisdom that comes from these traditions, but because I can't relate to them literally, like really being able to deeply engage with them symbolically through metaphor is really important to me in terms of how I engage with other people and the world at large, and the mystery at even larger. So the first one is really, it's anytime someone says the word corruption is what comes to mind. So it's the story of King Minos of Crete. And apparently, I think there was some kind of succession battle, internecine struggle, civil war, maybe him versus his brothers. And he prayed to the gods to side with him to become king. And I think it was something like Poseidon, the god of the ocean, sent this white bull. And the white bull was this amazing sign. And King Minos kind of won the battle and got to be king. But Poseidon asked, he was like, hey, I just want you to, that white bull that I sent, I want you to sacrifice it. So they're for whatever reason big into animal sacrifice in those days. I want you to sacrifice that to me. And the king was like, yeah, sure. But then the white bull was just so awesome. He was like, oh man, I can't sacrifice this white bull. It's amazing. I'm just going to take another white bull for my herd, because he was a king. I guess he had a herd of bulls. And I'm going to sacrifice a different white bull, and I'm going to keep that one in my herd, and I'm going to use it to impregnate my cows. That's what bulls are. And of course, nobody was fooled. It's not like the gods didn't know what happened. So he got his revenge. And it's like this kind of like, God, do I want to get into this part of it? It basically involves a bull and King Minos' wife, and there's some hanky-panky that happens. But the point for me, the point of the story, and then this is what leads, of course, that's how the Minotaur is born, and what leads to the whole thing of imprisoning the people and like needing to get tribute from these other lands, and so like stealing their children in order to feed the Minotaur, which he's so ashamed of that he's hidden it in this labyrinth. And then, of course, like the hero Theseus coming and like deposing the whole situation. All of that calamity and tragedy and murder can be traced back to this essential moment of corruption, where rather than taking it seriously, the role of being a king and having your personal gain and your personal desires be put aside for the good of the people you're supposedly serving. And this is a really charitable view of aristocracy that the story provides. But rather than doing that, which is what every good king should do, which is, I'm guessing, not what most kings ever did, he chose to be corrupt, prioritize his own personal gain, and therefore had his whole legacy be essentially doomed. So that's one story of like, it's about a lot of things, but it's like, messing with the gods and how you can get punished and what it means to be corrupt, and like what are the wages of corruption, as it were. And the second story it's kind of the opposite. It's like what you can do inadvertently to keep from getting all the good stuff that the gods have promised you. And so this is about a disciple of Krishna's. And there's this line that Krishna says. He's like, "Oh, I'm always there in every moment across space and time for all of my disciples. And if somebody really believes in me, I'm just going to take care of all their needs, all their food, all their clothing, all their shelter, all their safety, all this stuff." And so there's a disciple of Krishna's who's in trouble. There's two. I'm totally just making this up now. Let's say there's two, and disciple A, we'll call him George. Just typical ancient Sanskrit name, George. George is really just this humble disciple of Krishna. He's like walking across the bridge. I'm just totally making this up now. And there's a troll under the bridge. And George is like, "Oh man, there's a troll. Krishna, help me." And Krishna, he at that very moment, he was sitting down to this incredible feast that one of his queens, Rukmani, had prepared for him. And there were like 50 different dishes and puri and like mangoes and all the good stuff. And he was like, "Oh man, really sorry. I respect the food. I respect all the work you're doing, but I gotta roll." And so he like flies down in some kind of chariot and like smites the troll, comes back. It's about to begin his dinner. And then this other really faithful disciple who has got to be named something other than George, we'll call him Ashish, another great Sanskrit name. So Ashish is like in a similar situation where he walks outside and there's this giant dragon. And the giant dragon is like, roar, roar, and there's like fire. He's got these big claws and everything. And Ashish is like, "Oh man, Lord Krishna, please help me. I'm one of your cherished disciples, blah, blah, blah." And Krishna, who's about to have another bite of like this delicious mango something, is like, "Oh, I gotta go help my disciple guy." And then he goes and gets in his like weird winged chariot to fly down. But at that moment, the queen is watching him leave, and obviously she's like a little bit bummed because she planned this romantic dinner together and these candles and everything. She sees him get out of the chariot and come back. And she's like, "Oh, what happened? Why did you go save that guy? I thought you save all your disciples. Isn't that your whole thing, dude?" And he's like, "Yeah, it normally is. Those who trust in me and have faith in me. But at the very moment I was getting that chariot to go down and save that guy, I saw he picked up a little rock to defend himself. So I thought, looks like he thinks he can handle it, so I'll just let him handle it. Get it? Yeah? See what I'm saying? So, one is a story of corruption. The other is a story of what happens when you think you can do it yourself, or when you're like, oh, I'm not going to put all my eggs in the same basket. But I think both have this similar flavor. I don't even know how to describe the connection, but maybe it has to do with pride or an overestimation of the self. So here I am, a couple days later, and I just re-listened to those two stories, and I realize now, ex post facto, why I wanted to share them. And so here's the exercise I want to do, and I want you to do, is those stories are about the gods. But if we can replace that concept of the gods with something else, we can learn different lessons from these stories. So I want to fold this in to this series we've been doing on community. And I want you to think about those stories where instead of the gods, instead of Poseidon, instead of Krishna, we think about community and what it is to be corrupt, to receive the gifts of community and then lie and not put the community's interest or the whole's interest in front of our own, and what it is to not have faith in community and what we gain and what we lose by doing things alone. And so to tie this back to something that I probably shared earlier in this quarter when I had something about the invitation, the idea, I mean, for me, the idea that when we need something, we call someone for help rather than doing it ourselves is it's controversial. I mean, many people I know would see it as a weakness or as an imposition or something that's going to detract from a relationship, where my contention is it's exactly the opposite. I mean, when done well, obviously you don't want to be like serially imposing on people, but there are excuses for relationship building. And rather than trying to pick up that stone and doing everything ourselves, we're like, oh man, I need a hand carrying this heavy box of chairs or whatever to get a friend to come and do it. And then you have that half an hour of hanging out together that builds the relationship. So that's the proposal. Think about the King Minos story and the Krishna story as relating to community, something that's tangible and that you experience every day in your life, or if you don't, then you experience the lack of it, rather than just these ephemeral gods whom you may or may not relate to.
Hi everyone, this is Martin, your producer, audio editor, and sound designer in chief for the 10,000 Heroes team. I just wanted to take a minute to thank you for listening to our show. Let me tell you a couple of things. 10,000 Heroes is brought to you by the team at Momentum Lab. Pierre does our artwork, DJ Plainview composed our theme music, and I handle all the editing, production, and sound design. And now we're closing this episode with a word from our main sponsor, who also happens to be our host, Anchor.
Hey everybody, thanks again for listening. If you like this episode, there's two things I want you to do. One, introduce me to the most inspiring person you know so I can have them on the show. And two, take the next step towards us hanging out in person. Maybe that's signing up for the newsletter. Maybe that's attending an upcoming in-person or virtual event. What I'm trying to do here is destroy the basic one-to-many nature of this medium, podcast, entertainment, and replace it with something that actually builds connections between people. The beloved community, getting closer together, understanding each other, one conversation at a time. So, join me. Bye!